Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being with us again today. Well, I've got another pistol video for you here today, and it's going to kind of be a kill two birds with one stone scenario. I've had people ask in the past, and even now, to review the Glock MOS type pistols, and I've also had people say, well, you haven't really directly covered a Glock Gen 5, and that is true. So, today, to address that, we are going to talk about the Glock 23 Gen 5 MOS, chambered in .40 Smith & Wesson. And that way we can address both of those concerns at the same time. And we're going to do that in just a minute. Alright, once again, welcome back. Thanks for being with us today. If this is your first time coming to the channel, or if you've been watching our videos and just haven't had a chance to do so yet, and you like our content, please consider subscribing. You can locate that subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your computer screen, or if you're on a mobile device, you can scroll down below the video and hit subscribe that way. It's a simple thing that helps us out a whole lot, and we really appreciate it. So, the Glock 23 Gen 5 MOS. So, as I said in the beginning, I've spent some serious time with the Glock 23 as a carry gun. I like 40, I like 23, so, I don't really need to be sold on the idea of making the gun better. Now, this is the Gen 5, and as I said, we're going to try to integrate this discussion kind of two ways. Talk about what makes the Gen 5 different from the previous models, and to do that, I've got a 23 Gen 4 here. And most of what you're going to see between these firearms is going to be the same. Now granted, I have some upgraded True Glow sights on the Gen 4, so that'll be the only thing we can't directly compare, but I think everybody gets that. So they've made some changes on the Gen 5, not all of which I think make any difference, and not all of which I think really do anything. But to be fair, we'll talk about them, and obviously it's up to you to decide whenever you're making your buying decision. But as we go over these, you can see that the Gen 5 features these front serrations on the slide. That is a new thing. If you look at the top of the slide itself, you can see that the difference between the Gen 4 and the Gen 5, you can see how the front of the barrel is beveled here, and you don't have that on your Gen 4. It's squared off, so that's something new. Of course, if this had standard sights, it would have the same U-notch and white dot sight that you see featured on the Gen 5 here. I've just upgraded this to True Glow TFOs because I pretty much get rid of these plastic sights the minute I get the firearm. The other thing that you will notice that is different is that the Gen 5 has a ambidextrous slide lock / release, and the Gen 4 does not. And of course, this would be a good time to just double check. You can see that obviously we are empty, but just for grins there, we'll let you see that we are clear and ready to go. So, aside from the bevel on the front and the serrations, is there anything else that would make any difference? Well, looking at them, you do have the flared mag well here. Okay, it's a small thing, but if you're in a hurry trying to put a magazine in, I guess it's conceivable that that little extra bit there might assist with you getting your magazine in. I've never had a problem getting my mags into a Glock when I'm in a hurry, so I don't think that would be a big deal for me. Like the Gen 4, you do have the option to have the larger back straps here. The standard configuration with nothing is your small. You can add a medium, or you can add a large to make that more to your liking. I think that's something that was smart when they introduced that, and I'm glad to see that that is still here. You still have the same accessory rail from one to the other, so that hasn't changed. And The main difference on the grip, of course, is the fact that the Gen 4 featured the finger grooves, and with the Gen 5 they have done away with that, and they've gone back to a flat, slightly beveled at the bottom grip. Now, honestly, holding the firearm, I'm not really sure if I like the flat one better than the three-finger grip. It's not like the three-finger grip was perfect for me, because I have larger fingers. So it's not like my fingers fit perfectly into the grooves, but it is enough to, stabilize the firearm whenever I'm holding it. It's not a perfect fit, but it is still a fit. So having nothing here, I'm not saying it's a problem, it's just a different feel. So if you're used to using one, then that's something you might want to think about. One of the other things about the Gen 5, this is a small thing, but the magazines, they started using these orange followers in the Glock magazines. And of course, the older Glocks just had the black follower. And, I've had a lot of people with bad information saying, well, you can't use your Gen 4 magazines in your Gen 5 and vice versa, and that is completely false. My Gen 4 magazine goes right into my Gen 5, and my Gen 5 magazine goes right into my Gen 4. So yeah, that's completely false. I haven't had any issues with that whatsoever. Now they give you, speaking of magazines, one thing I do like is, of course, they give you 3 magazines with the Gen 5. I like that. Magazines are expensive, as you well know, so anytime that they're going to give you something with the firearm, that always makes me happy. So 3 is a good number. I always want to get more, but 3 is always a good starting point. And of course, let's get to the whole point of it being a MOS. Alright, so obviously, if you look on top, you can see at the back here, you can see the plate and you can see the 2 screws. Well, obviously that is where your optic is going to go. So they give you this nice kit here that has 4 plates, and you got your Allen wrench and you got your screws, so that you can remove this and replace it with one of these plates to match a number of different optics that are available on the market. If you're curious about which ones, you can go to Glock and check it out. I'm not going to go through all that, because if you're far enough along in the game, you're thinking about an optic, I think you could probably figure out which one you want, whether it'll fit the Glock or not. Now, I've mentioned this actually very recently. We did a video talking about optics on carry guns. And it's just kind of a coincidence that I ended up with this one here to talk about. But I have a Glock 19 MOS here that's already mounted with the appropriate red dot. And the reason I'm going to use this as a comparison is because they're the same thing essentially. This, I've got a Vortex Viper, and the Viper is not a bad optic. It's relatively inexpensive. You can see the dot there, and they have a pretty good warranty, and I haven't been kind to this pistol at all. You can tell it's had some wear and tear. It's definitely have seen better days. But even with all of that, the Viper has held up pretty well. Now, of course, you've got all kinds of, Trigicon, you got your RMRs and you got your Holosuns, you got all these different kinds of optics. So, trust me, this isn't an advertisement for Vortex. I just happen to have one here that would fit, so I'm just showing you what one of what your many options are. Now, the one thing, and I'll say this because I said this in the optics video, the one thing I wish that they did differently is, I have this optic set. If you'll notice, when I bring the sights in parallel, which will kind of happen below your line of sight there, you'll see it dip. But I have this weapons, co-witnessed as well as I can, to where when I'm looking barely over the top edge with that dot, then that means it's right on the money. the ideal situation would be if I had, you know, larger sights that you could truly co-witness the red dot with. Now you can get it pretty close doing it this way. You can simply, you know, ignore the regular sights and just zero, you know, zero the dot within the window on your target at whatever range you want it zeroed at, and you'll be just fine. It's very reliable. And even this lower priced Vortex Viper, it holds zero really well. As I said, I've beat it up and put it to the paces, and it does just fine. So it's a good option, but personally I really wish that if they're going to make a firearm that is going to accept those type of sights, I think it would make a lot more sense if they also put the larger sights on the firearm so you could co-witness it when you get it out of the box. Okay, and before we get to the rest of the specs, we just want to take a moment to thank our friends over at Don's Weaponry for providing us this beautiful example of the Glock 23 Gen 5 MOS chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson for our tabletop review today. Don's Weaponry is a huge supporter of firearm safety and education, and we can't thank them enough. So there's a couple other things that I wanted to mention while we're talking about some of the specs here as we're kind of getting on through this. And this is where it gets a little bit annoying. So the firearms are very, very similar, but they're not exactly the same. And the ways that they are different, to me, obviously I wasn't on the team that designed this gun, but man, there's some things I would have done different. And let me explain. So if you have a collection of Glocks like I do, and you've got various holsters, well, the one thing that's really nice is that if you got a holster that'll fit a Glock 19, well, you really have got a holster that'll fit, like, you know, over a dozen Glocks, because, you know, the shape and width of a lot of the guns are exactly the same, and you only have to get obviously up to the, you know, trigger guard to protect the firearm. So there's a lot of holsters that'll fit a ton of the same Glocks. Well, the difference between the 23 Gen 4 and the 23 Gen 5 is kind of interesting. So let me grab the 23 back here. It's almost going to show you the 19 there. So here's our 23 Gen 4. Now they look so similar, and as you look across them, they look just identical. They have to be the same, right? Well, no, they're not. And the issue here is that if you look at the width, okay, the Gen 4 is 32 millimeters or 1.26 inches in width. And then the Gen 5 is 34 millimeters, which is 1.34 inches in width. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have a holster that has like a Kydex insert, or if you use a Black Hawk a lot like I do, well, if you can even get it to go in, you have to loosen the holster up to where there's a lot of slop in it to get it to go in there. Either that, or if it's Kydex, it may not even go at all because you've only got so much room. A couple of millimeters doesn't seem like anything, but a lot of my holsters will not take the Gen 5. And yeah, I realize that's not the end of the world. You can just get new holsters. But to me, it's annoying that that for something like that they wouldn't have made those the same. I just don't really see the point in that. But, you know, I'm sure they had a reason for it. And the other thing is that the MOS is just a little bit heavier by about 3 ounces. And, of course, with a loaded gun, I mean, you're talking about, you know, when it's fully loaded, you're talking about 31.39 ounces in the Gen 4 and 34.36 ounces in the Gen 5. So it's 3 ounces total weight with the gun, which is probably not a big deal, but still, it's just slightly heavier, just slightly wider. I'm sure there's a relationship between those two things, but it's just something that you ought to be aware of. Not all your gear is going to work between the Gen 4 and the Gen 5. Okay, Now, so if we had to talk about, you know, carrying this gun, like I said, what I end up doing is just, I've got a lot of Galco leather, and those holsters have plenty of good break-in time in them. And so, for the purposes of the test, I end up using just a good old Galco leather holster inside the waistband, and with just a single clip. And obviously, if you're used to carrying a Gen 4, we're talking about 3 ounces different in weight. It was just as comfortable to carry as a carry gun as the Gen 4 that I was already used to. So as far as carry, you're not going to notice a difference. And a quick note, yeah, I didn't really talk about the range here because there's not really much point. I've shot Gen 5s. You know, I'm just now getting a chance to really talk about them. But, you know, I've shot Gen 5s quite a bit since they first came out. And honestly, I can't really tell much of a difference between the way a Gen 5 shoots and the way a Gen 4 shoots. I mean, the trigger pull is almost identical anyway. The Gen 5 has takes slightly less energy from the trigger pull. I mean, just a little bit. So, as far as me shooting it, there's no difference at all as far as I'm concerned. So, there wasn't a lot of sense in really going into detail with that. But I will say this, as far as overall impressions of the gun. If you really like carrying the Glock 23, if that's your gun, and you think that you might benefit from having an optic, well, like I say, I've used the 19 with the optic quite a bit, you know, mainly just for fun. And the only issue I have is, like I said, to me, if you're going to do this, you absolutely need to have a set of sights that you can co-witness with the firearm. I think that if you carry a red dot and you rely entirely upon the red dot, I think that's a mistake, because we all have good intentions to remember to turn it off. We all have good intentions to kind of keep up with how long the battery's been in there. But, you know, honestly, if I went to pull out a firearm and that firearm is dependent entirely upon a battery-powered sight for me to get a sight picture, I don't think that'd be very comfortable with that as a carry gun for me. It's got to have backup sights. And every weapon that I have, except for the 19 here that I've just used as a demonstration, has actually got the larger sights for that purpose. I just put this here so you guys could just see what it looks like on another gun. But, yeah, if you're going to do it, I mean, they're a lot of fun. And like I say, when you get used to using the red dot, it is, like I say, different manufacturers have different specifications on them, how nice they are. But, you know, just something as simple as the Vortex Viper, it's a good bright dot. Once you get used to it when you shoot, you'll learn how to get back on target, finding that dot, reacquiring it in a hurry. When you get to where you can do that, you'll actually be surprised at how well that you can shoot with that. But once again, you don't want that to turn into a crutch. So, to me, there's no substitute for you know, regular physical sights on the gun. So if you're going to do it, just make sure that you have sights that you can co-witness. That's just my opinion. But do what makes you happy, obviously. That's what it's all about. But I think it's a decent firearm. I don't think that most of the changes that make it a Gen 5 really amount to anything. I don't really care about front serrations. You know, the ambidextrous slide lock is not a big deal. You know, slightly different trigger weight, and then the mag well. These are so small a changes to me, they're not even worth mentioning. So, if you're used to using the Glock 23 and the Gen 4, and you don't plan on putting optics on it, then you probably don't need to upgrade, because I don't think you're really gaining anything. If you're getting one for the first time, why not? Why not get the latest and greatest version? Because it gives you the flexibility to do what you want to. So if you want to add something onto it later when optic, you can. So anyway, overall, not bad. Some interesting points there between the two generations, the Gen 4 and the Gen 5. And so maybe that'll give you something to think about. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for today. As always, we sure appreciate you being with us. And be back very soon with another video for you, of course. And until that time, everybody, please stay safe. and have a great day. Thank you.